I really was willing to sacrifice whatever. I would do whatever it took to give my kids the education that I wanted them to have. And homeschooling draws that kind of personality. Whether you're type A or type B, the earnestness of the parents involved in the homeschooling process, you can't overstate it. We're doing this on purpose and it costs us something. It's a really noble enterprise. I was born to a couple of academics, two teachers and lifelong learners. And so I grew up in a house filled with books where education was really important. And so I really valued education. Adam, my husband, also really valued education. We're both book nerds. We graduated from Hillsdale College, which is a great book school with a really fine liberal arts education. And 4 days after graduation, we got married. And it wasn't too long after that, as Adam always likes to say, the stork began to pay regular visits to our house, dropping off little bundles. And before we knew it, we had 6 children of our own. And my parents had been involved in public education. I was educated in the public school. And initially, before Adam and I got married, when we were talking about how we would educate our future children, that at that point were only ideas and hopes in our hearts, we argued about how we were going to do this. And I think I said something like, public school is fine for me. It'll be fine for my children. And what could you possibly be saying about my family? What's the matter with my family? And that kind of nonsense. And I don't remember that argument really ending, but I can tell you that when my oldest son, Ian, was about 2 years old, I came to bed one night with a magazine that laid out all of the different approaches to homeschooling. And Adam looked at me and said, "What are you reading?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, I thought public school was fine for your children." And I said, "Oh, no, my children are going to be homeschooled." So the Lord had clearly taken care of that by turning my heart towards homeschooling. And the type of homeschooling that appealed to me most as I surveyed all the different options was classical homeschooling, because it just, it smacked of the liberal arts, liberal meaning the arts that we study that make us free, right? And the idea of the freedom, not just political freedom, but spiritual freedom, was really important to me, that my kids would grow up knowing the Lord and walking in the liberty of the Lord, understanding what that meant. So this means was very familiar to me because of my education at Hillsdale, and also very attractive to me because of my my Christianity. So we decided that's what we would do. I started homeschooling Ian when he was about 4 years old. It was way too early. And I was, as you said, very type A personality. It was really important to me to do it right. I had to do it right. And I was willing to do whatever it took to do it right. I was terrified I was going to do it wrong and mess my kids up. So I spent hours and hours preparing. Initially, when I started, I was using a phonics curriculum that scripted the lessons. And I remember I'd have it open on my lap and I would read word for word everything that this woman, bless her heart, had written down for me to say. And it was a long time before I went off notes, off book, the theater people would say, and had any confidence that, oh yeah, this isn't rocket science. I can do this, because I just really wanted to do it right. It was so important. And that is the way I approached the education project with my kids from beginning to end, with ardor and earnestness. And I really was willing to sacrifice whatever. I would do whatever it took to give my kids the education that I wanted them to have. And homeschooling draws that kind of personality. Whether you're type A or type B, the earnestness of the parents involved in the homeschooling process, you can't overstate it. We're doing this on purpose and it costs us something. Right. It's a really noble enterprise. The problem is that I guess I conflated the nobleness of the enterprise with nobleness in myself. And that was the beginning of the problem. I was the fly in the homeschooling ointment. That is the hardest, deceitful, and desperately wicked. Who can know it, right? We don't know the depravity in our own hearts. And so I latched on to this homeschooling idea and imagined that in some way the virtuousness of the project made me virtuous, that the goodness of the project made me good, and lost sight of the fact that I was a sinner going about this business. Um, on any given day, I was about the business of discipline and instruction and preparation and grading and all of those kinds of things that everybody is engaged in. It looked pretty ordinary around here. But what I was doing constantly and earnestly was trying like mad to be good enough. Everything depended on it as far as I was concerned, that I was a good enough teacher, that I had prepared well enough, that they were prepared well enough. So pretty soon, because of the nature of the beast that is homeschooling, when my child got an A on their report card, I got an A on my report card. When my child failed the test, I failed the test. Because you're so involved in the process, you begin to conflate issues, if you're anything like me. And it's so subtle that it's almost unacknowledged, right? You don't. Nobody's messing up their kids on purpose. All of us want our kids to be well and to succeed. It's just that there's this impulse in our hearts to save ourselves. Right? And we grasp at the things around us in order to try to do that, to secure identity and name and security. And we look at this homeschooling project, which when I began the homeschooling project with my kids, homeschooling was like swimming upstream in the culture.
Sure.
There's still a little of that, but it's become much more mainstream than it was
sure.
25 years ago, right? And so there was this deep need to validate the project through success.
Mm-hmm.
And success meant results. Success meant A's and high scores on achievement tests and scholarships to colleges and high-paying jobs. And you can fill in the blanks. You know, it looks
Sure.
the same, I think, across the board. And all of those things are great things, but they're not ultimate things.
Right.
When we look to those things to validate our work, we do violence to the work itself, right? Though they might give us some good information, they don't actually have the ability to name us or to judge us in those things. But I was pretty quick to allow them to. So the role of the homeschool mom in education is to facilitate the learning process in their kids. And as I mentioned before, education is not what we think. It's not just let's learn about states and capitals and see if we can't get 100% on the test. Those are the things of education that we
Sure.
work on. But the real educational moment comes when Johnny gets an F on one of his papers and comes face to face with either his laziness or maybe it's a real impasse. He's just not wired up to learn that thing that way. And maybe like for me in mathematics, math was never going to be my thing. And I was pressed all the way to the end to work as hard as anybody could just to make the grade to move on to the next level and progress. I was never, ever going to solve the problems of the world mathematically. And I remember working in the subject of mathematics brought me up against myself so that I realized that though I was created in the image of God and I could learn to reason, I wasn't God. I was just a creature. And there were some things that were never going to be my thing. And that those things were gifts to me so that I would never make too much of myself, so that I would never come to think that I was a God instead of beloved of God. They were like road signs to help me figure out what a creature is and to redirect my impulses in a large way. So sometimes the F's that we get teach us more than the A's that we get, if that makes any sense. But if you're conflating the success of the enterprise with worldly success, grades and data and entrance exams that get you in the door and give you hefty scholarships, you lose sight of the real purpose of education in that regard, and you begin to conflate ends and means. And suddenly, the identity project is written all over the surface of the homeschooling project, both for the child and for the mother, because the child learns from the mother. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Homeschool Insights is sponsored by CTC Math. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com and try it for free. For more great homeschool inspiration and resources, listen to the Schoolhouse Rocked Podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday.